Welcome to this English story. Here you learn English by listening and relaxing. Just close your eyes, breathe slowly, and enjoy the story. You don't need to understand every word. Just listen, repeat some sentences, and let your ears get used to English every day. With every story, your vocabulary grows, your listening becomes stronger, and speaking becomes easier. Remember, slow progress is still progress, and every minute you listen is a step forward. Now, get comfortable, focus on the sounds, and let's start today's story in English.
The Girl in the Rain. Chapter 1: The Empty Bicycle. The year was 1985. It was a cold, foggy November evening in a small town. Autumn leaves covered the streets, and the sound of heavy rain beat against the windows. Inside the local police station, Detective Thomas sat at his desk, drinking a warm cup of black coffee. He loved the quiet nights, but tonight, the quiet was about to end. Suddenly, the front door flew open. A cold wind rushed into the room, and a young man stepped inside. He was completely soaked from the rain, and his face was pale with fear. His name was David. He ran straight to Thomas's desk, his hands shaking. The Conversation. Part 1. Detective, you have to help me. Please. I don't know what to do. David said, his voice trembling. Thomas stood up, trying to calm him down. Take a deep breath, young man, and sit down. Tell me exactly what happened. From the beginning. David sat on the chair, wiping the rain from his face. It's about my sister, Linda. She is missing. She was supposed to be home 2 hours ago, but she never arrived. Thomas frowned, looking at the clock on the wall. It was 9:30 p.m. Did you try calling her friends? Maybe she stayed late at school. Yes, of course. I've already called everyone. David said quickly. Nobody has seen her since 5 p.m. She always takes the same path through the old pine forest on her bicycle. I went to look for her, and I found something terrible. What did you find, David? Thomas asked, leaning forward. I found her bicycle, David whispered, looking down at his shaking hands. It was lying on the side of the mud path, near the old wooden bridge. Her school bag was still in the basket, but she was gone, completely gone. Gathering clues. Thomas immediately put on his heavy leather coat and grabbed his flashlight. Show me the place, David. We have no time to lose. Every minute counts in a missing person case. They drove through the dark, empty streets of the town in the detective's old car. The only sound was the rhythmic, slow movement of the windshield wipers. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. When they arrived at the edge of the pine forest, the rain began to slow down, but the fog was very thick. It was hard to see anything. They walked down the muddy path, their flashlights cutting through the dark shadows of the trees. A few minutes later, David stopped, pointing his light at the ground. There. Detective. Look. Under a large pine tree. Linda's yellow bicycle lay on its side. The front wheel was slowly spinning, as if someone had just left it there a moment ago. Thomas knelt down in the mud, inspecting the bike. He opened the school bag. Inside, there were textbooks, a pink pencil case, and a small, locked diary. But there was no sign of a struggle. No footprints in the mud, except for David's. Thomas looked at the dark, silent forest around them. A strange feeling crawled up his spine. Linda didn't disappear. It looked like she simply vanished into thin air. "Detective," David whispered, looking into the darkness. "Do you hear that?" The Girl in the Rain. Chapter 2, The Locked Diary. The forest was completely still. Thomas held his breath, trying to catch the sound David was talking about. For a few seconds, there was only the sound of water dripping from the leaves. Then, a soft, faint melody drifted through the trees. It sounded like an old music box, playing a slow, sad song. "Where is that coming from?" David whispered, gripping the detective's sleeve. Thomas pointed his flashlight into the thick bushes, but the light only showed tree trunks and deep shadows. The music played for another 10 seconds, and then, it stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence behind. "Let's get back to the car, David," Thomas said, his voice firm and steady. "It's dangerous to stay here in the dark with this fog. We need to inspect the clues we have, starting with this diary." The Conversation. Part 2. They drove back to the police station in silence. The warmth of the office was a relief after the cold, wet forest. Thomas set the pink diary on his desk, while David wrapped himself in a warm blanket, drinking a new cup of hot tea. "Detective, how are we going to open it?" "It has a small metal lock," David asked, looking anxiously at the book. Thomas reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small paperclip. "In my job, you learn a few simple tricks. Don't worry. I'm not going to ruin the cover." With a quick, professional twist of his hand, the paperclip clicked inside the tiny lock. The diary popped open. Thomas turned the pages carefully. The handwriting was neat, written in blue ink. Most of the entries were typical for a 16-year-old girl, talking about school, her friends, and her favorite music bands. But when Thomas reached the final page, dated November 12th, today's date, his eyes narrowed. Did she write anything about today? David leaned forward, his eyes wide. Thomas read the entry aloud, slowly. "I feel like someone is watching me. Every day this week, when I ride my bicycle home through the forest, I hear that strange music box. Today, I saw a silhouette standing near the old watchtower. He didn't move. He just stood there, waiting. I am afraid, if I don't follow the clues, he will find me." The answer is hidden in the year 1955. The unexplained year. David stared at the detective, looking completely confused. 1955. What does that mean? Linda wasn't even born in 1955. Our parents got married in 1968. Why would she write that? Thomas rubbed his face, feeling the exhaustion of the night. "I don't know, David. But the mention of the old watchtower is important. It has been abandoned since the end of the Second World War. Nobody goes there anymore. Do you think someone kidnapped her and took her there?" David's voice rose with panic. "I can't say for sure yet," Thomas said, trying to keep him calm. "But I promise you, I am going to find out. First thing tomorrow morning, at the break of dawn. I will take a search team to the watchtower. For now, you need to get some rest. Go home, stay with your parents, and let me do my job." "All right, Detective. I trust you." David stood up, looking tired and defeated. Please call me the moment you find anything. Anything at all. I will. David. Take care of yourself, Thomas said. After David left, Thomas sat alone in the quiet office, staring at the numbers 1955 written in the diary. He had a strange feeling that this wasn't a normal kidnapping case. There was a secret in this town, a secret covered by 30 years of dust, and Linda had somehow stumbled right into it. The Girl in the Rain. Chapter 3, The Old Watchtower. The morning sun did not bring much light. The sky remained a dark, heavy grey, and a cold mist hung over the trees of the pine forest. At 6 a.m., Detective Thomas arrived at the foot of the old watchtower. He was accompanied by Officer Marcus, a younger policeman who knew the local geography well. The tower was a tall, concrete structure, covered in dark moss and cracked by time. It looked completely dead, sitting silently on top of a small hill. Thomas adjusted his leather gloves and held his flashlight firmly. Marcus, stay close and keep your eyes open. The mud around here is fresh, so watch out for any footprints. The Conversation. Part 3. They walked toward the heavy, iron door of the tower. To their surprise, the door was slightly open, hanging on one rusted hinge. Detective, look at the lock, Marcus said, pointing his light at the handle. It was forced open, and recently. The rust on the ground is fresh. Thomas nodded. Someone definitely came here last night. Let's go inside, but be quiet. We don't know if we are alone. They stepped into the cold, dark interior. The air smelled of old concrete, wet wood, and burnt paper. In the center of the ground floor, there was a metal staircase winding up into the shadows. Hello. Is anyone here? Marcus called out softly, his voice echoing through the hollow building. There was no answer. Only the sound of the wind whistling through the cracks in the walls. Marcus, look over here. Thomas called from the back corner. He was kneeling next to an old wooden table. On top of it, there was a small pile of ashes. Someone had burned a large number of documents right before they arrived. Are those records? Marcus asked, kneeling beside him. Yes, or what's left of them. Thomas muttered, carefully moving the ashes with a small pen. Most of it is destroyed, but look at this piece of paper. The fire didn't catch the corner. Thomas lifted a small, scorched fragment of a photograph. It showed a young woman from the 1950s, smiling, wearing a vintage dress. On the back of the photo, written in faded black ink, was the name. Clara Pendleton. 1955. The connection. Marcus gasped softly. 1955. Detective, that's the exact year Linda wrote in her diary last night. Who is Clara Pendleton? I've lived in this town all my life, and I've never heard that family name. Thomas stood up, his face serious. The Pendletons were a very wealthy and prominent family in the region a long time ago, but they disappeared from the public eye overnight. Nobody talks about them anymore. It's like the town tried to erase them from history. Do you think Linda found out about them? Marcus asked. It looks like she found something she wasn't supposed to see. Thomas said, looking up the dark staircase. And someone is trying to clean up the evidence. Come on, let's check the top of the tower. We need to be absolutely sure she isn't here. They climbed the metal stairs, each step creating a loud, ringing sound in the quiet space. At the top floor, the room was empty, except for a small, broken glass window looking over the forest. But as Thomas turned to leave, something on the window sill caught his eye. It was a tiny, silver wind chime, catching the cold morning breeze. It was moving slowly, creating a soft, faint melody. It was the exact same melody they had heard in the forest the night before. The music box song. "Detective, look out the window," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Down there, at the edge of the trees. Someone is watching us." The Girl in the Rain. Chapter 4, The Shadow in the Trees. Thomas quickly ran to the window, pressing his face against the cold glass. Down below, near the thick pine trees, a figure in a long, dark coat was standing perfectly still. The figure was looking straight up at the tower window. "Let's get down there. Now," Thomas ordered. They rushed down the spiral metal stairs, their boots making a chaotic, banging noise. They burst through the rusted iron door, and ran down the muddy hill into the forest, crashing through the wet bushes. But when they reached the spot, the figure was gone. There were no footprints in the mud, only a few broken branches, and a terrible, cold silence. The Conversation. Part 4. Marcus leaned against a tree, panting heavily. He disappeared, just like that. It's impossible. Nobody can run that fast in this thick mud. Thomas looked around, his eyes scanning the dark forest. He knows this forest better than we do. "Marcus. He isn't running, he is hiding. Let's not waste our time here. We need to go back to the town archive. The answer to Linda's disappearance isn't in the mud, it's in the past, in the year 1955. They walked back to the police car and drove straight to the town hall. The town archive was located in a dusty, windowless basement, filled with thousands of old paper files, cardboard boxes, and historical newspapers. The old archivist, a man named Mr. Green, looked at them through his thick magnifying glasses. "Detective Thomas. Officer Marcus. What brings you down to this dusty dungeon so early in the day? We need your help." "Mr. Green," Thomas said, leaning on the counter. "We are looking for any records regarding the Pendleton family, specifically from the year 1955. It's a matter of life and death." Mr. Green frowned, his expression changing from cheerful to deeply serious. "The Pendletons. That is a name I haven't heard in ages. People in this town don't like to talk about them. It brings bad luck." "We don't care about luck, Mr. Green. We care about a missing 16-year-old girl," Marcus added sharply. "Please tell us what you know." "The secret of 1955. Mr. Green sighed and walked into the dark rows of shelves. A few minutes later, he returned carrying a heavy, dusty black ledger. He opened it carefully, the old pages turning with a dry, scratching sound. "Here it is." Mr. Green pointed his finger at an old newspaper clipping from November 1955. 30 years ago, the Pendleton family had a young daughter named Clara. She was exactly 16 years old. On a cold, rainy November evening, she was riding her bicycle home through the pine forest. She vanished, and nobody ever saw her again. Thomas felt a cold wave hit his chest. She vanished. On her bicycle. In November. Yes. Mr. Green nodded slowly. The police found her bicycle lying on the side of the mud path, near the old wooden bridge. Her school bag was still in the basket, but she was gone. Marcus stared at Thomas, his face completely pale. "Detective, that is the exact same description. It's identical to what David told us about Linda last night. The same age, the same forest, the same bicycle. How is this possible? Is it a copycat kidnapper?" Thomas didn't answer immediately. He was staring at the old black and white photograph of Clara Pendleton in the newspaper. She looked incredibly familiar. He turned to Mr. Green, his voice dropping to a whisper. Mr. Green, who was the detective in charge of the Clara Pendleton case back in 1955. Mr. Green looked at the old file, and then looked up at Thomas with a strange, sad look in his eyes. "The detective was your father, Thomas. Detective Arthur Thomas. And according to his personal notes, he never closed the case, because he believed the girl never actually existed in our time." The Girl in the Rain. Chapter 5, The Mirror of Time. The silence in the dusty archive basement was deafening. Mr. Green's words hung in the cold air. "Your father believed the girl never actually existed in our time." Thomas felt the room spinning around him. He looked at his hands, then back at the old ledger from 1955. "Marcus, we need to go back to the station. Now," Thomas said, his voice barely a whisper. They drove back through the pouring rain. The city looked dark, strange, and unfamiliar. When they burst into the police station, Thomas ran straight to his desk. He grabbed the pink diary they had found in Linda's bag the night before. He opened the first page, but this time, he didn't look at the text. He looked at the inside cover, where a small family photo was pasted. The photo showed Linda, David, and their parents. Thomas stared at the parents' faces, and his heart stopped. The mother in the photo, from 1985, was the exact same woman from the scorched fragment they found at the watchtower. Clara Pendleton. The Final Conversation. Part 5. Suddenly, the phone on the desk rang, breaking the heavy silence. Thomas picked it up with a shaking hand. "Thomas? Is that you?" a voice asked. It was the town hospital director, an old friend of Thomas's father. "I heard you are looking into the old Pendleton files from 1955. Thomas, you need to stop. For your own sanity." "What are you talking about? Where is Linda? Where is David?" Thomas demanded, pressing the phone to his ear. "Thomas, listen to me very carefully." The doctor sighed softly. "There is no Linda, and there is no David. David was a young man who lost his sister Clara in 1955. He went completely insane after her disappearance. He spent 30 years in the regional mental health facility, right next to the old watchtower." Thomas felt a cold sweat on his forehead. "No, that's impossible. David was here, in this office, last night. He sat in that chair. He drank tea. He drove to the forest with me. David escaped from the facility 2 days ago." "Thomas," the doctor said, his voice filled with deep sadness. "He is 70 years old now, but in his mind, it is still November 1955, and he is still looking for his 16-year-old sister. He imagines himself as a young man, and he recreates the search every year when the heavy rain starts." The shocking reality. Thomas slowly dropped the phone. It fell to the desk with a loud clatter. He turned around to look at Officer Marcus, but as he did, he froze. Marcus wasn't there. The office was completely empty. In fact, Marcus's desk was covered in a thick layer of grey dust. The chairs were broken, and the walls of the police station were cracked and old. Thomas ran to the small mirror on the wall of the office. He looked at his reflection. He didn't see a young, strong detective. He saw an old man with white hair, deep wrinkles, and tired eyes. He looked down at his clothes. He wasn't wearing his leather coat. He was wearing a grey hospital gown, completely soaked from the rain. In his hand, he wasn't holding a police file. He was holding a small, broken silver wind chime. The door of the office opened gently, and a kind nurse in a white uniform stepped inside. She looked at him with warm, sympathetic eyes. "Come on, David, it's time to go back to your room," she said softly, taking his arm. "The rain is over, and the night is peaceful now. You've been looking for Clara all night. You need to rest." David, who thought he was Detective Thomas, looked back at the empty desk one last time. The pink diary was gone. The yellow bicycle was gone. There was only the quiet sound of the wind outside the window, playing a faint, familiar melody. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let the nurse guide him down the long, quiet hallway, into the peaceful silence of the night.
If you enjoy these English audio stories, support the channel with a like and follow for new content every week. إذا أعجبك هذا النوع من القصص الصوتية لتعلم الإنجليزية، ادعمني بالإعجاب والمتابعة لمحتوى جديد كل أسبوع.